there guys, today I'd like to talk a little bit about vacuum tube burn-in. You may have heard the term burn-in before, and that's something that's often associated with brand new audio electronics. The speakers especially, they have a period of time in the beginning where they can sound a little bit brittle or harsh, and that can go away over time as the speaker gets used more. It sweetens, it sounds easier on the ears. And the same sort of thing can happen with a brand new baseball glove. You know, it's sort of rigid and hard at first, not the most flexible thing, or definitely not the most comfortable, but after you use it more, you break it in, and it's more flexible, it's more comfortable. And vacuum tubes are like that too. We call it burn-in, and how it works is you're going to run the tube's filament above what it's rated for. Usually about 10% is sufficient, and you would do that for about 24 hours, sometimes longer, sometimes less, depends on the scenario, but I think most places like tube stores that sell vacuum tubes will do it for about 24 hours. They probably have them on a timer. Now in the old days, vacuum tubes came right from the manufacturer burned in. That was one of the things that they did. And nowadays, I don't believe that happens, to save money most likely. So if you buy new tubes from a distributor like I do, they don't come burned in. And if you just plug it in, you'll notice that there's that crackly sound. Not always, but there's also another issue that happens too. If you have a tube tester, there's a feature that's on a lot of them called the life test. It's used to predict about how much life expectancy a tube has left. How it works is it reduces the tube's heater filament voltage just a little bit. So in the case of a 12AX7, which is rated for 12 volts, drops it down to 9 volts. If the needle indicates that it's a bad tube, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad tube if it's brand new. It just means that it needs to be burned in. It's that same issue of debris left over from the manufacturing process that's on the cathode that needs to be boiled off. So by increasing the filament voltage, you make it hotter than normally, and it allows that material to get off the cathode, allowing the cathode to work more efficiently, which then allows it to pass the life test after it's been burned in. And it gets rid of that noise as well. So I'm going to show you a tube up on the tube tester and kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. I have a JJ12AX7 hooked up to this tube tester, and also hooked up is a voltage meter so that we can see what voltage is actually on the heater filament. It's a brand new tube, it's been burning in for 24 hours, and this is what I would call a worst case scenario. It's a vacuum tube right from the manufacturer that really is kind of garbage, and I'm going to burn it in for 36 hours. I'm not so sure that that's really going to fix the problem, but we're going to take a look at what it does when we run it under a life test. So the life test is going to run it below what it's rated for. In this case, 9 volts. It's rated for 12 because it's 12AX7. And I'm doing the 9 volts specifically because that's what my tube pedals are going to be running a tube like this in. So I want to know if this will work in a tube pedal. So as we switch this over to emission, look at the top bar. The top bar is an indicator of what's going on here. We definitely want to see it in the green, and anything above 80 is pretty good. 100 is a great tube, and in rare instances it may be above that. If it's anything in a question mark or below, it really needs more burn-in, or maybe it just is a bad tube to begin with. So let's flip this guy over. The speed at which the needle goes up is a great indicator of the quality of the tube here. It's going real slow. You can see we're just right around 9 volts. And it's going to probably level off somewhere just above 20 on this scale, which is really bad, especially for 24 hours of burn-in. So let's just crank up the voltage now and see what happens. So we're going to bring it up to 12 volts. It's actually 11.19. I have this hooked up to my Variac, so I'm just going to bring that up to 12.6, which is what you would see normally. All right, 12.6 volts, it's a solid performer. If I switch it over to the other triode, solid tube, it's actually above 100, so that's really, really awesome. That's what you'd like to see in a nice tube. Now, just because it passed the tube test on its normal voltage doesn't mean that it's a great tube. It's probably going to be a little noisy. So I have another tube that has already been burned in and is a good tube. We'll take a look at that at 9 volts. So bring it back down to 9 volts. It'll take a while for this to go down, so I'm going to set my Variac to give us 9 volts. Okay, as you can see, that needle's just going right down, And we're actually looking at the other triode in this case, and that's also failing. You know, if I go back to the first one, yeah, it's just a terrible tube. So I'm going to run it for another 12 hours of burn-in, and maybe it'll fix it. I'm not so confident that it will, because it's not doing very good. So here is another JJ12AX7 tube, also brand new. This one's been burned in for 24 hours. Running it at 9 volts, as you'll see. As soon as the needle starts moving, let's take a look at how fast it goes up. Well, that's going up quite a bit faster than the other one. And that levels off real high in the good. So clearly a good tube. Take a look at the other triode. And it is right up there. And that's running at 9 volts. So that'll work perfect in one of my tube pedals. Now if we crank this up to 12 volts, obviously it's going to be, you know, above 100 probably, or right where the needle might not even move. And that's really what you want to see. So that's, you know, what you would expect to see with a tube that's been burned in. And it's probably going to be fairly low noise, I expect. So a solid contender right there. And if we then crank this voltage up to 12 volts again, I'm going to show you what a burn-in's like. So I said it's about 12.6 that you're normally going to see in a circuit that this tube is rated for. And if we just crank this up one notch on a tube tester, it runs it at 15.86 volts. I usually run it at 15 volts, so I just bring that down a little bit. That's the voltage I'd be going at for a burn-in if I wanted to burn the tube in. And that's what I'll be doing for the other one that's not performing very well. And as I said, I'll keep that on for another 12 hours on the other tube. And it will most likely improve, but I doubt it's going to be a good tube, so I'll probably end up having to throw that one away. Thank you for watching. I hope you found that interesting. I hope you're able to get something useful out of it. Next week I'm going to try to upload another video for you. Each Friday I'll try to keep doing it. Until next week, have a great day. Have an awesome weekend. I wish the best for your coming week. I'll see you next week.